Almost all major blockbuster adventure movies start in the middle of the action. They hook the audience by administering a hefty dose of adrenaline. And only after we're all hooked does it start with a blah blah. After we're all on board with the story. An ambush achieves that same thing at the gaming table. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where I read the script off the teleprompter, unaware of the fact that I'll be ambushed in 10 minutes. Wait, what? My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for 10 years. In medias res is a Latin phrase coined by the poet Horace in Ars Poetica. It means in the middle of things, and it describes a narrative device that starts the story in the middle of things. Which is why they say it starts in the middle of things. Man, those classical thinkers really cracked the base code of the universe. You know Sun Tzu's biggest contribution was try lying? Thanks. In medias res describes stories where we start literally in the middle. And then the characters say, I bet you're wondering how I got here, and the movie spools back to the start and we watch the first half of the movie wondering how they got there. But it can also mean we started in the middle and just carry on from there. No need to rewind. A lot of superhero reboots now just skip the origin story because we already know it. Many war movies start with our characters being deployed or in the middle of battle because we don't need to know that they had a life before the war. We know that implicitly. So how do we use in medias res in our game? Well, it doesn't need to be complicated. You can start your next campaign with the characters fighting the final boss of an adventure that happened off-screen. You kick down the door and you watch as Snorlgarl, the vizier of the screaming mass in Blackguard, turns to face you. Roll initiative. And then you run a boss battle from an adventure we never saw. I've done that. It's a lot of fun. But that does rely on a certain kind of buy-in. And in my experience, really only works with the scenarios where the adventurers know one another beforehand. The kind where they made their characters together. It also creates a certain kind of pressure on you, the GM, to be prepared to answer questions about how the characters got there. Of course, that might just be okay by you. Maybe you're going to bounce it back over to the players. That's your prerogative. But I don't think it needs to be that intricate. Since a campaign is strung together by a series of adventures, each adventure needs a start. Might be a lore dump, a dialogue scene, a mysterious plot hook or summons. Whatever works. These options are all okay. I use them all the time, but they're slow. Might take a while to build up, and sometimes you're looking to play an adventure now. So your players are all level 6, you've been playing for some time, and now you want to start them in medias res. You can do that. You can have the middle of the adventure come to meet the players. That's called an ambush. An ambush can be just like starting in medias res, but without the player buy-in of needing to skip over a bunch of stuff. You can always deploy an ambush as a part of your setup. What's especially great about an ambush is that by definition, your players will be caught off guard, which usually involves a bit of adrenaline, or at least raising the heart rate. Shock will do that to you. They're surprised. I don't mean mechanically surprised, but they might be that too. Stay tuned. So, if you manage to shock your players, they're already invested, and then you can structure your ambush so that hidden layers reveal themselves throughout the encounter. Shock and surprise create investment. You cannot have extreme feelings about a situation without being invested, and surprise and shock are a shortcut. Use them. When done right, it's just a simple bit of manipulation. What's more is that an ambush, by definition, is the absence of knowing. Even better, since it's combat, knowledge will increase as the fight goes on. Every turn, the enemy's motives, the battlefield, the combatants, everything becomes more and more understood. Therefore, an ambush is the story of learning under duress, which is, by definition, engaging. This is what makes ambushes one of the best ways to start a new adventure. But there's not just one way of using an ambush. Let's run through 8 different sorts of ambushes and see which ones inspire joy, how they can be used to start an adventure, and maybe we'll find some examples of similar encounters in TV and film along the way. Why did we pick 8 again? Is that on purpose? I don't think it was. I really just thought of exactly 8. Let's start simple. The travel ambush. You know the type. You were probably thinking of it when you clicked the video. It's that one ambush from the start of Lost Mines of Phandelver. The players are walking down a road when an arrow goes flying over their heads and we roll initiative. Goblins emerge out of the tree line and wham! We're playing the game. What's great about the travel ambush is that you can really deploy it anywhere. You can always toss some giant spiders at the party, no matter if they're in the forest, mountains, plains, or traveling by road. Just go and roll initiative. Obviously, just because we called it travel ambush doesn't mean you can't deploy these in a city. You travel through cities. Street thugs try to mug the heroes, or the rat folk from the sewers try to kidnap the smallest, most easily carryable party member. Suddenly that 5-foot-tall rogue starts second-guessing her life choices. I bet you that it'll only take 10 minutes for you to think up 6 different encounters you can deploy at a moment's notice for your party's current environment, which you could then stick on a list from 1 through 6. And you've got yourself a 1d6 random encounter table. And even if the travel encounter is a little bread and butter, you can always start an adventure with it. Fandelvers suggest the heroes track the goblins back to their lair. You could do that. The giant spiders could have a nest further below. Or, if you really want to start in the middle of things, one of the thugs carries a note with a plot hook on it. Only the plot hook is dense information. Your players stumbled into something big. That's the travel ambush, a tried and true classic. But there are so many other kinds of ambushes. This next one I'll call Quietness Erupted. Let's watch a scene real quick. In it, 2 cops are about to interrogate a witness in Los Angeles suburbia.
Like I said, Finn.
Probably nothing.
That was 1987's Lethal Weapon, written by Shane Black, who went on to make The Nice Guys and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. If you disagree with everything in this video, at least go watch those films. Trust me. Shane Black is famous for his specific brand of violence. Nerdwriter called it awkward violence in his video essay on the subject, but he also talked about how the director likes to visit violence during otherwise quiet moments. Essentially, Shane Black hooks the characters and the audience by ambushing them. And it works. He also directed that one. You can do the same. In a dead quiet scene, you continue to slow down the pace. Use your soft authority at the table to bring the mood down to a quiet whisper. Take long pauses. Describe some obscure detail. Render the moment. In your calmest voice, you say, you watch as the bartender at the Boar's Head picks up the glass of whiskey. The single ice cube bounces around the drink, which is so cold that by now, water is condensating on the outside. She takes a deep breath and says, okay, I'll tell you. Then the side of the bar explodes. The reactions I get to those are always the peak of the night for me. Watching the whiplash on my player's face, it brings me some kind of Machiavellian joy. After the reaction, you tell them to roll initiative, and they desperately try to find out what the hell just happened. Suddenly, the quiet moment erupted into violence. And boy, are the players hooked. But what if the bar doesn't explode? Instead, the bartender was evil all along. That's the twist character. Evil. In this one, you turn a confrontation on its head. Players thought they were coming here to confront the Baron's son about his scheme to unseat his dad and claim the throne. But what they failed to find out, despite the many clues I left for them, is that the Baron's son is a doppelganger. So when they confront him, I describe the heir's bones twist and turn. His eyeballs turn around in his head, and the skin melts to a shade of blue. Unlike the two above, this one can't just be randomly added. You should have some sort of narrative build-up to this moment. You know you've done a twist character right when the reveal isn't a complete shock, but a sense of I should have known, or I told you so. A lot has been written about subverting expectations following the end of a certain HBO show. I won't retread all that here, but let's just say there's a reason people love foreshadowing. It's because foreshadowing allows the sometimes ridiculous twist at the end to make sense. Because it was so heavily foreshadowed that we now realize it was inevitable.
Yeah, but it's trying to say is that...
Even if it was absurd to begin with. But what if the twist character got one up on the heroes? That's the elaborate scheme. I'll admit, this trick is a bit advanced, but I've pulled it off successfully. Twice, actually, against the same player in 2 different campaigns. I won't name names, but Hjalti knows who he is. An elaborate scheme has to be carefully navigated. It's easy to start stepping on player agency or believability, and if you do that, you'll kind of ruin it. You gotta be a little bit careful here. An elaborate scheme is simple. The enemies have a plan to get one of the characters alone and attack them 1v1. You get the joy of using a stat block that the party has out-leveled, but now it's facing one player, and suddenly it's terrifying all over again. The party is rewarded if they catch it happening and are able to help. Like one time, I remember a player saying out loud before the reveal, "I'm following Hjalte's character just a little bit behind," because they had clocked what was going to happen and they wanted to make sure they said it out loud before everything went sideways. Elaborate schemes work well with doppelgangers, oblexes, intellect devourers, basically any monster that can pretend to be someone the party trusts, or just a regular old betrayal. That works too. You can also have elaborate schemes on a grander scale, where the realization is that this trap we're in was laid long ago. The heroes watch as the last piece of the puzzle they failed to notice slides into place. And now, it's the worst case scenario. But what if it's just a fairly predictable ambush? Even explicitly humorous. Let's call this one the Han Solo charge. Yeah, the PCs chase after the bad guys into the next trap. This one's fairly easy to deploy in a dungeon, which, let's be real, the Death Star is a dungeon. After handily defeating one of the two kobolds on watch, the survivor runs off further into the dungeon, and a foolhardy player chooses to chase after the kobold, heedless of danger. And what happens? The moment the PC rounds the corner, a dozen more kobolds let loose their prepared attacks. A volley of sling ammunition peppers the PC, who's likely to go down and need some serious assistance from the rest of the party. This ambush is usually predictable enough that when one of the PCs fall for it, you're kind of expected to hit them hard, because the other players around the table are going to scold the PC when they regain hit points and start speaking again, or they have to spend a diamond. Don't be afraid to really thwack Han Solo when he tries this. The sixth ambush on this list has been better summarized by the GOAT himself. Orcs attack! I tend to think of this one as I'm bored or let's roll some dice. Really, combat is just a great way to unstick you from whatever you were spinning your wheels on. Whether it's a complicated puzzle, a long conversation about nothing, or an endless discussion on something the players won't be able to figure out just quite yet. Then, throw some monsters at them. Sometimes my pacing brain tells me it's time for combat. We've just had too much damn talking, and now it's time to roll some dice and kill monsters. You know, in my last session of D&D, several players didn't roll any checks. Some didn't even roll any dice at all. I love games where it's just drama and intrigue, feelings and emotions, planning what to do next and how it may have a knock-on effect. I love all of that. But sometimes I get so lost in the weeds of the drama, I forget D&D is a role-playing game. And that game term is there to remind us that we have to play a game. Deploying an ambush usually leads to us all sitting up straight, thanking the gods the adventure showed up. We can start playing D&D. This guy stabs me, I stab him back. Suddenly, Maeve remembers that she isn't Maeve the lawyer, she's Maeve the ranger, and she has Hunter's Mark, and a hankering to use it. Silas remembers he isn't Silas the police officer, he's Silas the barbarian, and he's about to show that monster what being recklessly attacked feels like. An ambush can just let us relax and start playing a game. Literally a game, with turns, actions, movement, dice, and numbers. It's fun. It's just good old fun. Okay. But what if your players are being really careful and they want to take a long rest because they go Nova in every fight and you can't challenge them anymore without homebrewing some nasty monsters? Well, it's time to hit them with the all-time classic, Campfire Ambush. Hit them with an encounter. Remind them that they can't rest in the dungeon or in the wilderness. Wherever they happen to be that you want to make sure they can't rest. It's popular to roll these randomly on a random encounter table, like we talked about earlier, but you don't have to. You can just decide that it's time for a fight, and send an owlbear or an ankheg charging into camp. And honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm in a position where if I don't send an encounter after the players, I feel like I'm betraying the fantasy I've set up. I told everybody the swamp was ridiculously dangerous, and now they haven't been attacked by grung once? That's just absurd. Let's chuck a few bioluminescent frogs at them and remind them that dangerous things live in the wilderness. And remind them that friend-shaped doesn't always mean friend. Don't lick the frog. That's 7, so obviously we have to add one more. An ambush that isn't really an ambush. It's the false ambush. Sometimes what you really want to do is just snap everybody back to attention. Back to the game. Players are on their phone or fiddling with their spells or rediscovering the intricacies of the ceiling. They're doing anything other than paying attention. Listen, your players are nerds because school was rough for them. They're probably all neurodivergent, so you gotta give a little jingle, jingle, jingle. And an easy way to do that is a quick reminder of danger without the combat. Describe something dangerous to pull them in, and then introduce a new NPC, or an important bit of lore, or whatever. Describe something dangerous, but then reveal they're too late, and a tragedy has already occurred. Obviously, you don't want to do it too often or it'll lose all meaning, but it's another tool to stick in your toolbox and use whenever you need to. I've even tried having everyone roll initiative in response to something dangerous happening just to simulate that feeling of tensing up as if battle is about to begin. I stole that from Phil Rom's Valengard campaign. It's good stuff. It's important to note that ambushes stretch what's expected of the DM a little, since you're deciding whether or not the players notice that they're about to be ambushed. You're deciding to be withholding for the sake of creating tension. I think that's okay, but there will be people in the comments telling you it's wrong. Like on a moral level. Those people get intense. So, let's talk about that. Why are there folks out there who think ambushes are evil? Probably because they've had a terrible experience with them. Probably because certain best practices weren't observed when they experienced them. At the top of my head, I can think of 3. Number 1, this rule is true for everything in any TTRPG, but especially when it comes to ambushes. Be fair and flexible. Since you, the DM, have all the answers and you know what's going on, don't be afraid to err on the side of the players when there's a conflict. Don't be afraid to extend a little leniency to ensure everyone feels okay and like you've got their best interests at heart. You're about to betray them horribly in a moment anyway. You might as well be all nice until then. It's just going to add to the drama. Number 2, if you think the player should get a chance of seeing the ambush coming, let them. If it's reasonable for them to learn of it ahead of time, let them. They're the heroes. Let them feel like heroes. If, however, they've taken no precaution and the enemy is competent, prepared, and in position, let the enemy get one over on the heroes. Because, and this is important, number 3, let the players win.
I suggest a new strategy, R2. Let the Wookiee win.
You're already ambushing them. You're already catching them off guard, and if they now all die horribly because of something that came out of nowhere, they won't care if it's what would have happened. They'll just feel let down. This reminds me of an example from Alfred Hitchcock when he talked about the difference between tension and shock. He said, imagine a scene in a cafe where 2 people are having a conversation, and then suddenly the cafe explodes and they die. That's shocking, sure, but there's no tension. They were fine, and now they're dead. Instead, tension is created when we see them talking, and then we see the bomb ticking away underneath the table. We don't know when the bomb goes off. It could happen at any time. And the 2 people are just talking, completely unaware. When will they realize? Will they split up? Leave? Oh no. Somebody else just sat at the table. That's tension. So anyway, make sure your players can win. Don't just blow up the cafe and kill them and leave them feeling like this entire adventure was for nothing. I don't mean trip over yourself to lose on purpose. Just make sure you understand that your job with an ambush is to lose gracefully. That way, you create a satisfying arc. It begins with incredible tension. It rises as new plot elements are revealed, and rises when players are on the back foot, and it quickly turns as the enemies start dying. If this encounter is supposed to be remotely balanced, you're presumably deploying somewhat weak opponents, since they're gonna have the upper hand. 3 points. Be fair and flexible. 2. They can spot the ambush. 3. Be ready to let the players win. Maslow's hammer posits that if the only tool you have is a hammer, you're tempted to treat everything as if it were a nail. Every so often, a meta term grips online communities, and suddenly hacks of all stripes think they've discovered the panacea of art. With it, they can hammer their way to a perfect piece as long as they treat everything like nails to be bashed in. In screenwriting, it's been likability, relatability, or arcs, all of which is important, but none is fundamental to storytelling. All you need to tell a story is intention and obstacle. John wants a cup of coffee, but the coffee store is closed. What will John do now? He'll go to the store in another neighborhood, a new intention, but his car breaks down. New obstacle. He'll take the bus, but he doesn't know the timetable, so he'll Google it, but his phone is dead, and so on. You get the idea. That's all you need for a story. Intention and obstacle. In TTRPGs, right now, it seems the meta term is player agency. And as I talked about in our deeply controversial video on fudging dice, player agency is vital when we're in gameplay. But it doesn't matter when we're engaged in setup. To repeat, every campaign, adventure, session, and encounter needs setup. Without it, there can be no meaningful and informed choices, so you have to engage in setup repeatedly. An ambush is a brilliant bit of setup. It propels the adventure forward without a long-winded plot synopsis, lore dump, or slow build-up. Nothing is wrong with any of those, of course, but if you're looking to launch your story forward with momentum, consider an ambush, a quick and easy solution. Start your stories with action and adrenaline. In medias res. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to support me and my girlfriend directly, you can consider becoming a channel member and getting access to our exclusive Discord. We're both on there along with players from my group, and we're happy to answer questions, talk about the hobby, the channel, or whatever else you've got on your mind. And if that's not possible or enticing enough, consider supporting us in other ways. You can like the video, comment, subscribe, or click the bell to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.